Starting to get some more reports out of what happened in the hill country of Texas with the flooding that ended up killing over 130 people. And the communication was a problem there. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the cancellation of Colbert, defunding NPR and PBS. The right guy to talk to about all that is going to be the chairman of the FCC. It's our friend Brendan Carr. Brendan, how are you? Good to see you again.
I'm doing great. Good to be with you, Joe.
It's good to be with you. We talked about this briefly before we started. You know, I'm not far from where that massive rain happened and where the flooding happened, killing a lot of people. And we're finding out from some meetings now, some committees that are getting together, the communication wasn't as good as it could have been locally and statewide. State and locals weren't talking very well. This is a very remote area. I'm not sure if you've been to the Kerrville area of Texas. I was there last week when the president was in town. And the cell service sucks. It's not very good. The emergency alert system is going to work only if you sign up for it. Is there something we can do maybe via satellite? Is there, in emergency times, is there something from the FCC perch that we can say, if we did this, it might be better?
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, look, obviously, what an unbelievable tragedy. And I want to express my thanks and appreciation to all the first responders that have been working so hard over there. You touch on a lot of interesting issues. One is when you look at communications between various public safety agencies at the state and local level, that's been a challenge over the years, but we're continuing to work and find ways to get them onto the same radio networks, onto the same communication systems to try to break that down. In terms of coverage of networks for private sector civilians, we're making some progress there too. We're launching what's called a Build America agenda at the FCC, and that's designed to make sure that every single community has robust, resilient communications. To your point, there's also a new generation of satellites where they have a new service, what we call direct to cell, where your phone can skip the terrestrial cell tower, go directly to a satellite to reach connectivity. Right now, it's sort of in beta mode where it's text communications, but we're trying to free up the spectrum so that direct to cell works more robustly everywhere. And that would get rid of dead zone, including in places like that.
So you would never have a dead zone? You would always have cell service of some sort, no matter how remote you are?
That's right. Yeah, that's the promise of these direct-to-cell technologies. Again, even in Texas, there's a company. I was in Midland, Texas, a couple weeks ago visiting a business that's launching one of these satellites. There's going to be more out there that's providing this new service. Again, right from your cell phone to a satellite. So no matter what's happening on the ground, you're going to get some level of connectivity everywhere in the country.
It's amazing. It is Brendan Carr. He's the chairman of the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. We always appreciate the time and the access. I want to talk about defunding NPR and PBS. This seems to be a no-brainer to me. We know that just objectively, they are completely biased to the left. We know that. So they're getting taxpayer funding for a long time, billions of dollars. And a guy like me has to compete with that. I have to give them my money as a taxpayer, and then I've got to go out and get my own sponsors and endorsements to keep my show up and running, whereas they get to do it on your money, my money, and everybody who's watching listening's money. It has been unfair for a long time, but the argument is, oh, you need information, we have to do this. Brendan, we're not telling those two organizations they have to shut down, right? We're just saying you don't get the taxpayer money.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if you just could sit back and the federal government cut you a big check, millions and millions of dollars?
Yes.
Every year to do this program, and then you wouldn't have to worry about, raising revenue. But look, the fact of the matter is that PBS, NPR had years and years to make the case to Congress that it was worth reaching into America's pocketbooks, pulling money out, and subsidizing their business model. And they simply made the opposite case. And actually, if you look right now, there's a lot of people that are saying that they're raising record levels of private sector donations to close the gap. That's great. That's how the system should work. If people like that type of content,
yes,
they're free to support it. But I think what President Trump has done in terms of finally delivering on this promise to defund NPR and PBS is a really important step forward for us.
And I've got to ask you about that because this is all very, very interesting to me. People are saying that they can't survive. They're only getting about 10%. I think it was only 10% of their income from the taxpayers. It was still like $1 billion a year, 1.1 billion, something like that. And it was unfair to a guy like me. But if you're doing the right job, you're going to stay on the air. And in fact, if they were at least a little more balanced, they probably would not have lost the funding. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah, I think right now they need to be responsive to the market, and they weren't before.
Yes.
And it's funny in the amount of funding they used to say when this came up, a year or so ago, oh, we only get 1% of our funding from the federal government, not a big deal. And then they start to take it away. They say, wait a minute. It's a lot more of our funding than we were making clear before. So I think that's interesting, but they'll be fine. But look, the people that hired some of the executives over there that have been running these organizations, they really need to do some pretty serious thinking because the work that the leadership did at NPR and PBS help accelerate this day, I don't think that can be understated in all of this.
It is Brendan Carr, the FCC chairman. Go and check him out on X. Brendan Carr, FCC, over on X. He does a great job. Makes the Chinese mad at him, which I think is actually kind of great. If the government of China doesn't like you, Brendan, then I like you a lot. Let's talk about AI.
Yeah.
I have used DeepSeek just to see what it does, but I think that it pales in comparison to some of the stuff we have here. ChatGPT, I use that. I use Grok over on X. I think that AI is certainly the wave of the future, but I do fear because somebody can now steal my face and my voice and use it to their own benefit and not give me any sort of a benefit from it, a royalty from it or something. With the new AI action plan, are you going to protect the creation of a guy like me, my own internal stuff that I created? I put it out there. Am I now going to be safe because of whatever this AI action plan is, or does it have nothing to do with that?
Yeah, I had the honor of being with President Trump yesterday when he signed those 3 executive orders that established the AI action plan. There's actually a piece for the FCC to help contribute on that. And what President Trump has said is he wants America to have the gold standard AI. And he's putting in place systematically a method to ensure that every level of the stack that you need, the technology stack for AI, America wins. It'll have protections in place in many cases to address the types of concerns that you have. But there's a competing system out there. As you indicated, DeepSeek in China, they're developing their own version of AI. And for too long in DC, we were sort of stagnant when it came to this new technology. But this new AI plan that President Trump put in place with his AI czar, David Sack, it's really going to get things ripping and building again in this country. And it's important for our own economic development, but also to make sure that the world has a choice for a free AI, free from ideological bias. And you saw that in some of the executive orders to get rid of woke AI and get that out of our system.
Yeah, I think if you search Tiananmen Square on DeepSeek, it lies about what happened that day in the late 80s. So you're right.
Yeah.
It's massively biased. You got to figure out where the source is. But when it comes to my intellectual property, something that I created of my own brain with my own face and my own voice, and not just me, I'm talking about everybody who's watching and listening. Everybody is a star on social media now. Are there protections there? Because I literally, Brendan, here's the thing. I'll give you a little background. Somebody contacted me via email, some company. Hey, we want to protect your AI, and we'll over the next 10 years, we'll pay you $22,000 to make sure that we're protecting your intellectual property on YouTube and on Instagram and so on. And I said, absolutely not. I've got control of my own intellectual property. I think they were trying to get some ownership of my voice and my face. And I think people got to be very, very wary of that. So in this move that the president signed, the 3 items, are we protecting original creators? I mean, people are 18 years old and they're making $1 million a year by creating their own stuff. If somebody steals that, they're done.
Yeah, I think we can have protections in place that deal with that, whether it's here or even just the Federal Trade Commission in terms of their application of existing consumer protection laws. I think we can do that, and at the same time, again, let the economy rip in terms of the investments that we need to see for these AI technologies to succeed.
If we're the number one, if we're the gold standard, as you said, will that weed out places like DeepSeek? Will that tell the general public internationally, if you want a reliable AI that's going to tell the truth, be unbiased, and not try to skew it one way or the other, you got to go with this one? Is that what we're hoping to do?
Yeah, that's right. Look, it wasn't that long ago. On my first international trip in this job, I went to Barcelona in Europe. I met with European officials, and a couple interesting things from that. One, they're watching DeepSeek and the Chinese version of AI, the skewed ideological bias one, and they're watching America. And it's sort of a time of choosing for Europe. And with the U.S. leading, I think makes it a bit easier for them to come join America as we lead the world with this version of AI. But look, Europe is really struggling right now. Their economy is struggling. They're having a hard time with innovation. They're continuing to embrace censorship online and pushing for it. Many countries in Europe are doing that, so they're struggling. But yeah, I do think the U.S. leading is going to be, a beacon that others can follow.
It's kind of scary. AI is scary. I'll be honest with you. It's scary, but it's great at the same time. It's one of those, man, I hope this is glass half full. And I think by what you're saying and by what the president's doing, it will be. It's Brendan Carr, chairman of the FCC. Yeah. I wanted to bring up something you and I talked about probably a year ago. I know that there was like $44 billion in a fund to expand broadband and get internet service to places that don't have it. Is that still in the works? Because I believe Kamala Harris was in charge of doling out that money. And at last we spoke, she didn't do any of that. Is that money still there? If so, will we be getting more broadband in rural areas that need it?
Yeah, what a mess that program was. So Vice President Harris was put in charge of this $42 billion plan to connect millions of Americans to the internet in over 1,000 days. No one was connected. In fact, not even a shell worth of dirt was turned. It's an unbelievable story. Now, Secretary of Commerce Lutnick is now in charge of that program, and he's reoriented. He said, get rid of the DEI stuff, get rid of the unnecessary red tape, get rid of the bias that's been embedded in it. And he's giving states a small window here to reset their approach, and then he's going to relaunch that program. And I'm really excited. I think we'll get the dirt turning here pretty soon. I'm sure you'll see, Secretary Lutnick, probably the president, probably myself across the country, as we are going to finally deliver where President Biden and Vice President Harris failed. So we will get those billions of dollars finally turning dirt here in the near term.
Strictly speaking, there's a lot of bloat in a lot of agencies, a lot of bureaucracy in a lot of agencies that we're hearing about since President Trump was put back in office. What about the FCC? I get the feeling that's a smallish agency that might not be dealing with bloat and with waste, fraud, and abuse. Is there anything there that you're able to clean up as the chairman?
Well, we are a small agency, but Joe, we punch above our weight. The FCC was, roughly 1,400 people or so. Maybe almost 1,500 when I came in to lead as chairman. I think we're down somewhere in the 1,300. So maybe, if my math's right, we're close to about 10% reduction. So we're in pretty good shape from that perspective, but we are driving much more efficiency. We've cut over $500 million in terms of excessive IT contracts. We've also got rid of the FCC's promotion of DEI. I mean, you may remember, but the FCC had listed DEI, promoting DEI, as its second highest strategic priority, right?
Crazy.
We're supposed to be the pipes and tubes people, right? Getting people connected. But no, it was DEI, as everything was in this town for so long. So we got rid of that. So again, we're a little bit more nimble. We're focused in. We've got our own sort of Doge effort taking place. We're deleting unnecessary regulations. So yeah, we're putting the FCC on a diet. But frankly, the team of people that are here and that have stayed here, they're a really talented group of public servants, and we're getting some good stuff done.
It is Brendan Carr. He's the chairman of the FCC. We always appreciate the time and the access. Brendan Carr, FCC, over on X. Make sure you go and follow him there. When it comes to the FCC, strictly speaking, I've always thought in terms of radio and television, over-the-air radio and television. But there is more involvement in the internet. How far does that go? Like, I stream the show as well as I put it on terrestrial radio. So I'm guessing that you've got a much more direct overseeing of what I do on terrestrial radio than I do on the internet. Is that role expanding because so many more people are communicating via the internet only, and they're not using it the old-fashioned way? Do you switch gears as the FCC chairman, knowing how everybody's doing Zoom, everybody's streaming now, everybody's using IP?
Yeah, well, our authority obviously sort of happened and defined by the Communications Act. So to your point, when you look at the different means of communication, traditional radio, traditional terrestrial, broadcast television, that's where our authority is really pretty significant in terms of making sure that these entities are operating in the public interest. When you move to cable channels, our authority starts to recede. And then when you get sort of online streaming, podcasts, we really don't have much jurisdiction there at all. And some people would say, well, isn't that odd that you're sort of regulating or potentially heavily regulating broadcast, but not these other things? We'd say that's the product of Congress's decision, and it's not for me to walk away from enforcing the public interest obligations on broadcasters. And the reality is, I think we're starting to see some course correction across not just the broadcast media, but a little bit on some other forms as well. And I think that's a good thing. We can get into that a little bit. But frankly, all this goes back to President Trump. When President Trump ran, part of what he did was he ran against this idea that the traditional broadcast media, with executives sitting in New York and Hollywood, could dictate to the entire country what they get to think about things, what they get to say about things in the political narrative. And President Trump said no. He channeled the American people who simply did not trust those gatekeepers, and he smashed the facade that they can control how things operate. No other politician did that, right? Every other politician said, I can't say this because I'll get hit by ABC. I can't say this because I'll get hit by NBC. President Trump said no. And once he's done that, look at all of the dominoes that have fallen. He basically said the emperor has no clothes. Well, Colbert has been canceled. NPR has been defunded. PBS has been defunded. Joy Reid's gone from MSNBC. Lester Holt's gone. The producer of 60 Minutes is gone. CBS is now committing to sort of address bias in their coverage. There's been settlements with President Trump and apologies. Again, people say, was Trump involved in all of that? And I say, go back to the fact that he sort of exposed these business models for what they are, and then you'll see all these consequences following from that.
And they did so well for so long, and great way to just spell all that out. Thank you. But they've been this way for so long that they were pushing the idea that they could do anything they wanted anytime they wanted. And to your point, President Trump said, no, you're not. Give me $15 million, ABC, because the guy called him a rapist. Or CBS, give me tens of millions of dollars too, because you elected to edit an answer from Kamala Harris that made her look more authoritative and not the the word salad person that she was. Colbert is out of a job. Trump didn't push him out. The fact is, it's not funny, and it's biased, and it's not what Johnny Carson was when I was growing up, or what Jay Leno even was, or what David Letterman was. Letterman is a far leftist in his real life, but I never saw that in what he did in late-night television. So it's really the market adjusting to the new reality that woke is done, and you can't just say and do anything you want and pretend you're profitable if you're not.
Yeah, I mean, look, the idea that these partisan carnivals can continue as a business matter, the evidence is coming back and it's saying no. And to your point, these late night shows, not just the late night show, but all of them, it was a really interesting time in America's television. You had really talented people, Johnny Carson, to your point, Letterman, Leno, they were sort of, funny people across the
Yes.
board. And when you look at what's happened with Colbert, I mean, honestly, it's kind of sad. I mean, he's lost it. If he ever had it, he's, staring impending irrelevancy in the face, and he's reacting to that. It's a sad thing to see. And again, I think it comes directly from President Trump just smashing this idea that these are infallible gatekeepers and, everybody must laugh at, their unfunny jokes and listen to what they have to say.
Right. How do you respond to people saying the Paramount deal is why they're pushing him out just to kiss up to Trump? I mean, I don't see any connection whatsoever. If the guy's making a bunch of money, and if he's funny, and if the audience really loves him, they're going to keep him on. Plus, they're letting him stay on until next May, which is crazy. So I guess every night he can complain about Trump. But what do you make of the allegation that that Colbert is out because Paramount wants to kiss up to you and the FCC and to Trump?
Well, look, I think, again, this is all downstream from President Trump calling out these, broadcast networks and saying, look, the emperor has no clothes. People don't trust what you have to say anymore. And I think all of this is a downstream consequence of that. And with respect to Colbert, look, the reporting is he was losing something like $40 to $50 million every single year. I mean, that's just not a sustainable business model. If you look at how he's, reacted to the show being canceled, it's really not a surprise that CBS made the decision that's just not in their long-term economic interest to keep him around.
Exactly right. It's Brendan Carr, the chairman of the FCC. Go to Brendan Carr FCC over on X. Thanks so much for making time and for spelling all that out as clearly and as easily as you do. Thanks, Brendan. I appreciate you.
Thanks. Good to be with you again.
All right, brother. We're back after this. Stay right here.